Alexis Lafreniere continues to pop up in trade rumors, but today we are telling you exactly why the Rangers must stay the course and not trade Lafreniere.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blueshirts fans, to episode number 1324 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, Jon Chik. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, and we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So something else that's been something of a hot button topic for Ranger fans throughout the offseason here, and honestly, probably even dating back into the regular season, at least the second half of the regular season, is the idea of the Rangers potentially moving on from Alexis Lafreniere and pulling the trigger on a trade. And I do not think this is a good idea at all. But the first thing I wanted to do was at least acknowledge the other side of it and try and understand where certain fans may be coming from if they are of the opinion that the Rangers would be better off trading Alexis Lafreniere and basically just taking whatever they can get for him. So generally speaking, I think one of the first reasons here why there might be certain Ranger fans that are on board with the idea of trading Alexis Lafreniere is I think we're getting to the point where there's just a certain amount of frustration among Ranger fans. First of all, there's frustration with everything about this team, top to the bottom, front office, the coaching staff from last season, the players themselves. Obviously, it was a miserable season where next to nothing went right, and there was very little positives to take out of the season and very little things to feel good about, not the least of which was the apparent regression of Alexis Lafreniere. So I think in general, there's just a certain amount of frustration among this Ranger fan base, and a lot of it is being pointed at Alexis Lafreniere. And it's not completely unfair that that is the case, because with Lafreniere, he is now 5 seasons into his career. And when you think about everything that's happened with Lafreniere over this past half decade here, you look at his first 3 seasons, it was basically an ongoing debate among all of us Ranger fans as far as like what exactly is going on with Lafreniere. Now, initially, the first year or two, you say, well, he's just a teenager. You throw him right into the deep end. And, of course, there's going to be some growing pains and we do have to be patient and all that good stuff. But there were also debates as far as like how much of Lafreniere's lack of production is on Lafreniere himself, how much of it is on the coaching staff, how much of it is on the fact that he's never getting to play top 6 minutes, how much of it is on the fact that he never is out there on the top power play unit, and sometimes maybe not even on the power play at all. There was a theory that, he obviously missed out on a lot in his rookie season due to the fact that there was no training camp, there was no preseason, thanks to the pandemic, of course. So there was all this conjecture, all this talk about like, okay, what exactly is the cause here? 3 seasons into Lafreniere's career, why exactly is he not producing the way that we were all essentially promised that he would produce? This is a very highly thought of prospect. This is the consensus number 1 pick in the draft that year. He's a can't-miss player. He's got all the intangibles, just a phenomenal hockey player, and he's going to get into the NHL and basically just set the world on fire. So there were certain, I don't want to say excuses, there were certain reasons you could find as far as why Lafreniere was not, excelling in those first few seasons there. But I think one of the big things that, I guess the anti-Lafreniere people might point to is the fact that in those first 3 seasons, there was just a lack of wow factor when it came to Alexis Lafreniere. And you can be a supporter of Lafreniere and you can point to the lack of production and you can have certain reasons for it. But again, if you weren't impressed with what Lafreniere was doing, I think that's one of the biggest kind of feathers in your cap is just the very simple fact that, there just wasn't that many plays from Lafreniere where he really jumped off of the page. And so, I think this all kind of came to a head last season because everybody that had kind of supported Lafreniere and preached patience and preached staying the course with Alexis Lafreniere, myself included in that group more often than not, we all thought last year that Lafreniere had arrived and that he had arrived in a big way. And of course, yes, he benefited from playing with Artemi Panarin, but that's okay. You're allowed to do that if you're a young player, benefit from playing with a certain star player or this player or that player, whoever it might be. But I think, last year, Lafreniere's 4th season in the league, it was very vindicating to see him, finally reach his potential. There was just, first of all, you just look at the numbers, obviously massive uptick there. And also just the fact that, again, that wow factor was on display a lot more last season than it had been for any of the previous three. And then we saw what he did in the playoffs last year, and he was fantastic there as well. And so now we fast forward to this season that just ended for the Rangers a couple of weeks ago. And it's like we're right back to where we were in those first couple of seasons there. He seemed to regress. He seemed to really take a step back. And another reason why I think people have for wanting to trade Lafreniere, this leads me into it very nicely, is the fact that, again, his play dipped this past season, and it dipped specifically right after he signed his extension. He came out at the start of this season. He looked good. He was piling up some points early in the year, and then it wasn't more than 7 or 8 games into the season, I believe it was, where he signed his extension, and immediately a very noticeable dip in play. Now, I was hopeful at the time that, okay, I mean, it's a slump. Everybody goes through it, right? Just about every player in the NHL will go through a slump of some kind, a scoring slump or whatever it might be from time to time. And I thought that's what was going on with Lafreniere. But it felt like he just never, for the entire rest of this season, never got back to the level that he showed at the beginning of this season before he signed the extension, as well as the way that he played last season in the regular season and certainly in the playoffs. He just never really got back to that level. The fire seemed to go out a little bit and just wasn't performing at the level that a lot of us were expecting. So I can understand, again, all the frustration coming from Ranger fans that are, kind of trigger happy right now as far as like maybe looking to trade Alexis Lafreniere. Another reason you could make in support of trading Lafreniere is that it would allow you to clear out some cap space, because we've all been doing this pretty much the entire offseason. If you're a Ranger fan such as myself and you want to be right on top of every little thing this team is doing, big or small, whatever it might be, whatever kind of transaction that they're about to make or whatever the latest rumor might be, we're all looking at Puckpedia or whatever your preferred salary cap website happens to be. And okay, how do we clear out some cap space? How do we make it where the Rangers might be able to make some moves this offseason or next offseason? And we throw out everything from trading Chris Kreider, that would save $6.5 million, trading K'Andre Miller. Now, Miller does not have a contract, but obviously if you trade him, then you're not paying him and you don't commit to him financially. The idea of trading Mika is out there, $8.5 million cap hit. Unfortunately, he does have a full no-move clause. The same can be said for Artemi Panarin and his $11.64 million cap hit. He does have a full no-move clause as well. But I wouldn't trade Panarin either way, but I know certain Ranger fans certainly would. Trading Carson Soucy, $3.25 million. It's not an enormous amount, but it would free up a little bit of cap space. Those are all some ideas, but another way to trade or to free up some cap space would be to trade Alexis Lafreniere, because that would open up some serious cap space in both the short term and the long term. Lafreniere is signed for 6 more years at $7.45 million per season. He's got no kind of no trade clause for this upcoming season. And then for the rest of his contract, the final 5 years, he will have only an 8-team no trade clause. So you can trade him whenever you want, in theory. There's nothing that really prohibits you from doing that. And that would be a way to open up some cap space. And so people that want to move on from Lafreniere, that might be one of the reasons right there that, okay, we move on from him and maybe we can do some other stuff in the way of trades, free agency, or whatever it might be, because obviously that would open up some options for the Rangers, again, both in the short term as well as the long term. I look toward next season more so than this one, though, because next season's free agent class is absolutely crazy. Superstars up and down the list as far as the free agents next season are concerned. I realize some of those players might re-sign with their current team, but if you were to move on from Lafreniere, whether it's now or even next offseason, that does open up a whole new world of possibilities for the Rangers. A whole bunch more cap space becomes available, and you as the Rangers then might be able to land one of these, superstar free agents to be next offseason. But that's a ways away, and despite everything I just said, I still favor the Rangers hanging on to Lafreniere for this upcoming season. I favor staying the course, and I'm going to explain my reasons why in just a second. Most of which is the simple fact that you would be trading low, and I just think that's really bad business. You'd also be kind of, getting rid of, it's a little dramatic, but getting rid of the last remnants of the Ranger rebuild. I'll explain what I mean by that in just a second as well. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that is both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios are one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It is the perfect grab and go snack for busy days. Whether I'm snacking at my desk, on a road trip, or just need a quick protein boost, they are always a great go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are always a classic favorite. The satisfying crunch of opening each shell, it is like snack meditation. Whether you're running between meetings or dropping off the kids, wonderful pistachios are the snack that works just as hard as you do. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Huge shout out to the everydayers. As always, thank you guys so much for supporting this podcast through thick and thin, all the ups and downs, the regular season, the postseason, the offseason, as we are currently in right now. And in our next episode, more draft talk, where we'll be taking a look at 3 other NHL draft prospects. These are all players that I think are at least options for the Rangers at number 12. That's, of course, assuming that the Rangers keep that number 12 overall pick this season. But these are 3 picks that I really like. I'll go ahead and list them right now. Raddy Murka, Jack Nesbitt, and Justin Carbonneau. They are all options at number 12 for the Rangers, and we discuss all those players at length in tomorrow's episode. But for right now, let's go ahead and keep the focus on Alexis Lafreniere, and more specifically, why I believe the Rangers should stay the course with Lafreniere. First of all, they don't happen as often as you would like them to, but there are multiple instances where Alexis Lafreniere has showed you just how good he can be, just the type of player that he can be at this level. And when you consider the fact that the Rangers are still in win-now mode, it just doesn't make any sense to move on from Lafreniere after a down season. And as I've mentioned in the past, we can debate the merits of the Rangers staying the course and kind of retooling and reloading here for next season, as opposed to doing a full-on tear-down rebuild. This is a concept that we've debated in the past and will continue to do so heading into this upcoming season, especially after we see, what the Rangers do in free agency and what the moves might be as far as which players get traded, which players they acquire via a trade. We will see. But the bottom line, this is what they're doing. The Rangers, their MO right now is to load up for this upcoming season. They believe that they are still contenders. They believe that this window is still open, and they believe that last season is a fluke. And you don't have to take my word for it. When you follow the moves that this team has made over the last calendar year or so, all signs point to them looking to contend in this upcoming season. Not the least of which, by the way, is bringing in Mike Sullivan, because Sullivan, I don't think that he really want to go full-on rebuild with the Penguins. It sounds like maybe that's what they're thinking a little bit. They're going to look more to rebuild. He felt that the team could still contend. The bottom line, he didn't come to the Rangers to go through a full-on tear-down rebuild. The belief is there that this team still can contend. And you might agree with that. You might disagree with that. But all this is to say that when you follow the moves that the Rangers have made recently, it just wouldn't make any sense to trade away Lafreniere, because as much as last season was rough for Lafreniere and a lot of players on the Rangers, he did do some good things. He was more productive this past season than a lot of people probably realize. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that in just a little bit here. But you don't retool this roster to this degree and then essentially sell low on one of the guys that was one of your best 5v5 players this past season. That might be hard to believe, or maybe it's not that hard to believe, because a lot of players in the Rangers just didn't play very well last season. But yes, Lafreniere was one of the best 5v5 players on the Rangers. So again, if you look at all the transactions, it just doesn't line up with the Rangers' current line of thinking that they would now trade Alexis Lafreniere and get very little back for him. Certainly less than you should be able to get for a player like Lafreniere, based on what Lafreniere showed last season as opposed to this season. It would be a classic sell low situation here. So to build on what I just said a second ago, another reason here why I think you stay the course with Lafreniere, he was more productive this past season than you might think. Again, the eye test was not great. Multiple instances where he wasn't back checking or just kind of got lost out there, whatever the situation might be. Long stretches of hockey where, he went forever without scoring a goal. What did he have? Like 2 goals in 30 games or something absolutely obscene like that. So it wasn't good. Again, you can say the same thing for a lot of players in the New York Rangers, and certainly we have done that on this podcast. But even in a season where Lafreniere really didn't look that good, at least for the majority of the season, consider this. He was still 47th in the NHL at 5v5 points with 40 points. And I got to shout out David on Twitter, because he kind of brought this to everybody's attention. I know it got my attention when he posted this stat. But Lafreniere with 40 points at 5v5, that was more 5v5 points than all the following players. I'll go ahead and just list it for you guys right now. Rantanen, Austin Matthews, Alex Ovechkin, Pavel Buchnevich, Quentin Byfield, Wyatt Johnson, Brian Rust, Jamie Benn, Tim Stützle, Martin Necas, Sam Reinhart, Anze Kopitar, and JT Miller. That's a lot of really good players that I just listed off right there. And Alexis Lafreniere at 5v5 had more points than anybody whose name that I just mentioned. It was also the second most points, Lafreniere, at 5v5 on the New York Rangers. And again, you could very easily make an argument, and I won't argue against you, that has more to do with the Rangers just being flat out bad this past season than it has to do with Lafreniere being good. But facts are facts. Alexis Lafreniere, second on the New York Rangers last season in 5v5 points. The only player that had more points than Lafreniere at 5v5 was, of course, Artemi Panarin. He was actually fifth in the league at 55. And if you're curious as far as who was third on the Rangers in 5v5 points, that would be Will Cooley, which, again, it's surprising when you first say it, but then you think about how this season went and how he was one of the few Rangers that exceeded expectations. Yeah, Will Cooley at third, 5v5 points, that sounds about right. And keep in mind, Lafreniere was second and 47th in the league at 5v5 points. This is during what many would call, and I would agree with this, a down season for Alexis Lafreniere. He still found a way to get 40 5v5 points and finish second on the Rangers in that category. And to kind of build on that, Lafreniere only had 4 power play points. He had 2 goals, 2 assists on the power play. That was it. And he never really became a mainstay on the New York Ranger power play unit. You got to figure if he was getting top power play minutes, as he certainly should have been toward the end of this season, when the Ranger power play was basically just stinking out the joint every single night. What were they? Like 2 for 43, 2 for 44 at one point, and Laviolette just refused to make any adjustments, refused to make any changes. Lafreniere, I mean, there were times he was on the power play last year, but he never became like a true mainstay on that unit. And then once the Rangers acquired JT Miller, any chances of Lafreniere becoming a fixture on the top power play pretty much went out the window. And maybe that's the case this season, but again, you could see Chris Kreider get traded. That opens up a spot. Even then, it might be hard for him to crack that top power play unit, but you could drop Mika down to the second unit. There's ways to make it happen. I just get the feeling that Lafreniere, finally, they'll throw him in the deep end. Mike Sullivan will do that, and he will be on the top power play unit. I could be wrong. We'll see how Sullivan handles Lafreniere as well as some of the other young Ranger forwards, but I'm at least keeping my fingers crossed and trying to stay hopeful that he'll give these guys a chance, and we will see. Another reason why I don't think you trade Lafreniere right now is the optics of this would be terrible, especially for Chris Drury. Now, Drury, we don't know how long his leash is with Dolan. It seems to be longer than certain other people that have been in the GM position, that have been in the head coaching position for sure, because Drury is now on his third coach. I know some people say his fourth coach, but when it was David Quinn, I mean, he was the assistant GM. So, I mean, he was in the room, sure, but he wasn't like the guy making that decision. So I still consider this to be his third head coach. But still, he's going through coaches rather quickly, and it doesn't seem like his job is in any kind of danger, especially when you consider that he just signed that extension this offseason, did Chris Drury. But again, the optics of moving Lafreniere right now would be absolutely terrible. You sign this guy to a 7-year extension, and you're going to bail out 1 year into that 7-year deal. I mean, I know Lafreniere had a bad season comparing, what he did this year to the season before that. But again, you could say that just about every single player on the New York Rangers. It basically applies to every single player on that roster. And if you trade him now, I mean, indecisive much, you're going to give somebody a 7-year deal and then just pull the plug on it after 1 year. I mean, in theory, you could do this, but it just gives off the impersonation that you don't know what the hell you're doing. And I know a lot of people are going to hear that and say, well, Drury doesn't know what the hell he's doing. But Drury's made some good moves. He's made some bad moves. I feel like, as I've said in the past, the last year and a half, I think have been the roughest stretch of the Chris Drury era as the Ranger general manager. But if you deal him now, then why did you extend him in the first place? You went in on this guy. This was your guy. He's coming off of a strong season, off to a good start this past season, and you offer him a 7-year deal at more than $7 million per season. And you run for the door after 1 year. That doesn't look good. So I just don't think that that's a road the Rangers are going to go down. I don't think it's a road that the Rangers should look to go down. And here's a big one for me as well to kind of build off of this last point. You would be selling incredibly low. Part of the reason, as we discussed, why Lafreniere's numbers are down is that he doesn't get the power play time that a lot of other players get. I think with more power play time, you'd see those points per game. That number would be quite a bit better than it currently is. And I just can't get on board with the idea of taking pennies on the dollar for the former number 1 overall pick in the NHL draft and somebody that as recently as a season ago was looking like an emerging superstar. Again, I am willing to write this off as a bad season for Lafreniere. I'm hoping that that's just the case for the entire Ranger team. This was just an off year. Everything got fouled up. Everything basically just fell apart, and they can put the pieces back together throughout this offseason. Obviously, there's a new coach and whatnot, and that things can be a heck of a lot better this upcoming season than they were this past season. And I just don't think that it behooves the Rangers to essentially just bail on Alexis Lafreniere, because if you do that, again, pennies on the dollar. That's the analogy I made just a second ago. And just the very simple fact that I think it would be making the team worse. And I don't think you want to do that because, as we've mentioned, everything the Rangers have done, it all points to this team looking to contend this upcoming season. You look at what Lafreniere did last season. Excellent regular season. Honestly, even better in the playoffs. He was the only Ranger forwards that looked like he had any chance against the Florida Panthers this past year in the playoffs. And, obviously lit it up in that series and did a great job in the postseason. Just can't move on. Here's one other thing. I mentioned the optics a minute ago. Here's another reason why they would be terrible. Because if you move on from Lafreniere, what do you really have left from the Ranger rebuild? I mean, there's certain players that would still be here. I mean, but there's a lot of players that you've already given up on. I mean, this team scapegoated Capo Caco over and over again, and then they traded him. They also traded Filipino, who was very young. Now, Hito, you can justify it a little bit more because obviously he's got the injury history, that scary concussion history that he has, and you were trying to bring in JT Miller. So with that one, you can at least understand it a little bit. And obviously all the best to Filipino, but you can justify that trade a little bit more than some of these error moves. I mean, who do you have left from the rebuild as far as some of the young guys? I think you got to count Igor Shesterkin, even though certainly there was some luck there. The Rangers drafted him in the 4th round, and we all know how goalies can be a little bit of a crapshoot in the NHL draft. I guess you can count Adam Fox. I mean, he was here at the start of the rebuild, although he is 27 now. Braden Schneider, he was part of the rebuild too, but, half the fan base wants to trade him, and he's got kind of an uncertain future with the Rangers as well. There was a listener comment on one of the recent YouTube episodes that we posted here asking to discuss the future of Braden Schneider. We will get to that in a future episode. I think that's an interesting topic, but that could go either way. Keandre Miller, I mean, that was looking good through like 2 years, and it's kind of fallen apart recently. So, again, like, if you move on from Lafreniere, that's the entire kid line. Everybody loved this line as recently as a couple of seasons ago. I mean, all 3 guys were still on this team at the start of this past season, and you want all 3 gone by the start of next season? I don't know. I just don't think that looks good. And I can't really count like the next wave of young Ranger forwards as part of the rebuild. And guys like Perreault, Hoffman, Berard, to me, that's all. None of them were part of the rebuild. And they're all promising players, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do. But yeah, I mean, those guys were like in high school when the Rangers were rebuilding, so you can't really count it there. So if you give up Lafreniere, again, who do you have left in terms of like big-time difference-making forwards from the Ranger rebuild? Pretty much nobody. That's basically the long and short of it. So I'm not giving up on Lafreniere. I'm not going to allow some team to swoop in here and buy low and, watch him have a great bunch of seasons for some other team. I'm out on that. Be curious to see what you guys think about it, though. Definitely let me know in the comments section. In just a second, though, we're going to keep everything rolling. Going to shift our attention to the Stanley Cup Final. Quick preview here between the Panthers and the Oilers. A rare rematch of Stanley Cup Final participants from one season to the next. We'll get to that in just a second. All right, let's go wrap up today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers by looking at the Stanley Cup Final. As I just mentioned a second ago, we've got the Panthers, we've got the Oilers, and we've got an ultra-rare Stanley Cup Final rematch. The Stanley Cup Final begins on Wednesday at 8 o'clock. Every game of the series starts at 8 o'clock, so that'll be easy for all of us to remember. One difference from last year, though, this time around, the Oilers going to have home ice advantage in the final, which can only help their cause. Obviously, the Panthers, I think a lot of people look at them as the favorites, and rightfully so. They just play a brand of hockey that is tailor-made for the playoffs. You guys see how dominant they've been, knocking out the Lightning in 5 games, going down to the wire with the Leafs, but a decisive couple of wins toward the end of that series, Game 5 and Game 7, both on the road, all Panthers against the Leafs in that series, and then dispatching the Canes in the conference final in just 5 games. So they're back. I am going to go with a little bit of a bold prediction here as far as the early parts of the series are concerned. I am going to say the Oilers are going to win Game 1, and they're going to win big. And the reason I think this, first of all, home ice advantage, that can only help you, right? But when you consider last year's Stanley Cup Final, for anybody that needs a refresher, Panthers won the first 3 games. Everybody was saying it was going to be a sweep. Everybody was saying it was going to be a sweep after game 1 of last year. And obviously, when it comes to the Stanley Cup Final, or the Stanley Cup playoffs in general, you just never know for sure. You never know what's going to come next. You never know what's going to happen next. You think you've got everything figured out, and then a couple of curveballs. And obviously, the Oilers got back into that series, ended up losing to the Panthers in 7 games. But the Oilers certainly remember that. They remember getting into that hole, falling down 3-0, and then nearly pulling off the impossible. But I think they're also keenly aware of the fact that they cannot let that happen again. Yeah, never say never. Nothing's impossible. You fall behind 3-0. It's doable. It's only happened 4 times in NHL history, but it can be done. It's at least possible. But my God, I mean, you talk about digging a hole. You want to go down 3-0 against the Florida Panthers. That is a very unenviable position to be in. So I just feel like the Oilers are going to come out game 1. Again, they'll have the home crowd behind them. They're going to come out like their heads are on fire. They're going to be skating. They're going to treat game 1 like it's game 7, basically. And I think the Oilers are going to get a pretty convincing win in game 1. I also think that this is a situation where the home team is going to win a good amount of games in this series. I don't think there's going to be too many road wins. Not that these teams can't win on the road, but I just feel like it's going to be a great series. And I feel like we're owed a great series because when you look at the Stanley Cup playoffs this year, I thought round 1 was awesome. I mean, to begin with, it's tough with the Rangers not being in it. But if you're looking as objectively as you can and you take the lack of Rangers out of it and you just look at the games being played and how back and forth these series were and all the dramatic moments. I mean, you look at, the Jets and the Blues. You look at the Avalanche and the Stars. Oilers and Kings was pretty dramatic. Even like the Wild and the Knights, that was a pretty good series. I was really into the Senators and the Leafs. That was a lot of fun. So the first round was awesome. I feel like these last 2 rounds have been lacking a little bit. Just not quite as good. Jets and Stars, that was a pretty good series. Leafs and Panthers was good. It went 7 games. Other than that, nothing great in the second round. The conference finals weren't good either. Both of them were over in just 5 games, and both of them were pretty convincing wins for the teams that advanced to the final. So I think we're owed a good Stanley Cup final. I think we're going to get a very good Stanley Cup final, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. As far as former Rangers go, we've been doing this through every round of the playoffs. We take a look, basically just spotlight, players that used to play for the Rangers that are still going in the playoffs. And obviously now we're down to just 2 teams, so there's much fewer former Rangers. But basically this is what you're looking at. For the Oilers, you've got Ty Emberson and obviously their coach, Chris Knoblauch. For the Panthers, you've got Nico Mikkola. Emberson is an interesting one because he has played in 9 of Edmonton's 16 playoff games, although he has not played since the second round, game 3 against Vegas. But he did play in 76 regular season games, so his name will be on the Stanley Cup if the Oilers win it. Emberson, technically not a former Ranger, but he is a former member of the Wolfpack. If you guys remember, this is going back a couple of years now, but Patrick Nemeth was signed to a 3-year deal, one of Drury's not-so-good moves, and spent 1 year here. It was pretty bad. He didn't play well at all, and the Rangers had a contract on their hands in the offseason that they needed to unload. They did this by trading Nemeth and a couple of second-round picks to the Coyotes. Part of the return package for the Rangers, though, was Ty Emberson. Emberson ended up playing 69 games with the Wolfpack that season, 7 goals and 20 assists, and that was his lone season with the Wolfpack. Played last season with the Sharks, and then this season with the Oilers. And, I mean, honestly, it seems like he's become a pretty solid defenseman, not a superstar or anything like that, but somebody that obviously was a fixture in the Edmonton lineup for a good chunk of this season. And he's got a chance to win a Stanley Cup. Now, whether he cracks the lineup again or not, we will see about that. But you've got Chris Knoblauch as well with the Oilers. And this is another reason why it's very easy for me to root for the Oilers in this series, the coaching matchup. Chris Knoblauch, who I think we all liked. I mean, there's probably some of us that are disappointed that he's not the coach of the Rangers right now and, leading the Rangers to prominence like he obviously has done with the Oilers. Of course, it helps having McDavid and Draisaitl. You can start there, but he's obviously done a heck of a job. So that is disappointing. But I think most of us did like Knoblauch when he was here. Took over the Oilers midseason last year, made it to the finals. He's got them back in the finals this year. I think he deserves a lot of credit for that too, because losing in the Stanley Cup final, absolutely gut-wrenching. I mean, I've never personally done that. I've never been on an NHL team that has lost in the Stanley Cup final. But man, I mean, you guys know, anybody that's played sports at any kind of a level, Losing in a championship game is absolutely devastating. And this is the NHL. It's an absolute grind. It's a marathon to try to work your way to the Stanley Cup Final even once. But to take that gut punch, to take that absolute blow last season, losing in as devastating fashion as they possibly could in Game 7 against the Panthers, and then come back this year, make it all the way back. I think for sure, the coaching staff deserves a heck of a lot of credit for that happening, because it's not easy. It's not easy to get all the way back to the Stanley Cup Final. They did it. And like I said, Knobloch, give him his flowers for guiding his team and making that happen. But yeah, he is going up against Paul Maurice, who I'm kind of getting tired of, if I'm getting completely honest. I talked about this when we did our ranking of like teams I'd most like to see win the Stanley Cup against teams I wouldn't like to see win the Stanley Cup, just kind of rank them 1 through 16. Like, I don't dislike Maurice, but like his act, I think, is just getting a little bit stale. Like, he can never answer a question seriously. And then you had in this last round, his team beats the Canes in 5 games to advance to the Stanley Cup Final. And him and Brind'Amour Moore are talking after the game, and a lot of you know where I'm going with this, and they shake hands and everything. But then Maurice is like telling Brind'Amour Moore, like, oh no, I don't go through the handshake line. That's for the players only. And like, first of all, that's not even true. Maurice has gone through the handshake line multiple times in the past. And how are you going to like lecture the opposing coach right after your team beats his team and like take this like moral high ground of like, oh no, I don't go through the handshake line. Maybe Brind'Amour Moore wants to go through the handshake line and congratulate certain players on the Panthers, guys that he might know, guys that really impressed him in the series, to kind of just like spring that on him at the last second. That's just doesn't sit right with me. And like, it's only for the players. The coaches always go through the handshake lines. Can you show me any other instance? I mean, maybe it's happened, but for the vast majority of NHL history, the coaches go right through the handshake line with all the players. And I think that makes sense. I think that's a good thing to do that. And all of a sudden he just wants to like, have this, again, like this moral high ground of like, oh no, that's only for the players. Cut me a break. It's ridiculous. And keep in mind, Brind'Amour Moore, I mean, I don't love Brind'Amour Moore. I don't hate him. Like, he's just kind of whatever. But, I mean, his team just lost. It's a tough moment for him. If anything, Maurice should have gotten in touch with Brind'Amour Moore before the series to say, what do you think about this? I'm toying with the idea of not going through the handshake line. Me and my coaching staff will sit that one out. Do you and your coaching staff want to do the same thing? Don't spring that on him right after you eliminate his team. That's just me. But that's another big reason why I can easily root for the Oilers over the Panthers in the Stanley Cup Final here. Of course, the Panthers do have Nico Mikkola, and that's cool and everything, but he won a Stanley Cup last year, obviously a former Ranger. I don't care if he wins another. I'm just being completely honest. But we will call it there for today. Once again, thank you guys as always for tuning in, and I will see you next time.